So in the reference sheets in Blackboard, and this is the sheet that you probably got earlier when I first handed out the elevations, that porch reference sheet, which one is it? Let's see if that's it. That one. Go on to the lower left-hand side of that sheet. On this particular sheet, it's showing us that the column is 1.5 inches below finished floor. So the porch itself is 1.5 inches below. But in this case, the trim board here, instead of being 4 3/4 inches below the plate, is actually at plate height, 8/11 5/8. So because it's a much shallower roof, it changes the overhang quite a bit. So, and then they've got the trim over the fascia board there. I never have understood exactly where they came up with 3 inches, but we'll stick with it. I mean, typically you would have the trim over the fascia board, which would either be 5.5 or 7 1/4. So either one of those doesn't subtract out to 3. So maybe they're ripping the board. I don't know. But anyway, we'll stick with what they've got. We're still using a 2-foot overhang, basically from the edge of the main part of the column here out to the edge of the overhang. It's going to be 2 feet. And just like it was on the plan, from the frame wall here where the column is out to the edge of the siding, it's going to be 3 inches. This line, which is slightly behind the 3-inch dimension line there, is actually the 3.5-inch trim line that would be over the top of the siding coming through there. And then we've got 3.5-inch siding back at the wall, and it all kind of connects back here. So you can kind of use that as your go-by to set this up. Most of this stuff is on A elevation dark, except for the one line above the column here, which is kind of a trim piece of 1 by here that's 3/4 inch, and then they decided to extend this out 1/2 inch rather than 3/4. I don't quite understand that, but that's what they did, so that's what we'll do. All right. Okay. So anyway, this is our bases. And then over here we also have a water table trim, which is on the light layer. It's not on the elevation dark or medium layer. And when we put in the level 1 finish annotation, it's going to be over the top of that, so you kind of lose the definition of where the water table trim is, but it's basically 2 lines representing the water table trim, and the bottom of it is at finished floor. The top of it is 1.5 inches. So the porch is 1.5 inches below, the top of the water table trim is 1.5 inches above. All right, so now let's actually draw that. So instead of starting with the front, we're better off to start on the left side, west side elevation. And it's in this area here. So we're facing the direction, we're kind of drawing where the elevation slopes and all. So if we set this to A elevation dark, and we'll set all these to by layer. All right, so from the edge, and this is just a construction line, from the edge of the column here out to the, make sure my ortho's on, out to the face of the trim, it's going to be 2 feet. All right, so, and we are at the 8/11 and I think it was 5/8. So that's actually the line in that format thing that we use for the UCS. It's at that same height. So that's where the 2 and 12 would start. So since the 2 and 12 is a ratio, basically start on top of the line here, come back 12 feet, and this just to construct the diagonal 2 feet up and then close it. That should give us a 212 slope. Yeah, X is 12, Y is 2, so that's good. This really has no relevance now, so we'll just erase those 2 lines, but it does start there. And then according to that diagram, we have 1.5 inch trim, so offset 1.5 inches. and then 3 inches below that. It'd make much more sense if that was another dimension, but that's what they use, so we'll just stick with it. If they were actually using that dimension, they would have to cut the board. They would, what they call, rip the board to make it that dimension, so I don't know why you would do that, but that's the way they did it. All right, so back here, since this is the one by out here at the edge, these 4 should connect there, and that should already be connected, and then you would offset it to 3/4 of an inch back, as usual, for the roof. And then you would trim that up. Now on the other side, this goes a foot past the framing, but it's actually 1.3 from the edge of the house, because remember we have 3 inches of siding out there. So if you project down from where that line went back on the roof plan, which this is that foot back from the framing on the roof plan, that's where, can't see it, there it is. That's where it ends. It's a foot back from the framing on the roof, but it's going to be, because the siding was 3 inches further out, it'll be 1.3 here. And then we'll come back in another 3/4 of an inch to get the trim and the fascia board there. And then come back and fill it and clean those up. And then trim that. Alright, and then this line is going to be trimmed back to the bottom side of the fascia. Right, on top of the column there, and again, the column sits 1.5 inches below finished floor. And so at the top of the column, right there, you're going to have the line coming across. I'm beginning to wonder if that's not a black screen. I want to check something real quick. It has nothing to do with what we're doing. I don't know if that made any difference or not. All right, so start at the top of the column, come back across, and then offset it 3/4 of an inch up. That line's going to come to the back side of the 3.5 inch trim. So you would just fillet those together. So if this is running into the 3.5 inch trim, it's not going up any further. Over here, this is actually, according to the go-by diagram, is coming past the top of the column there, and it's going out the 3 extra inches, like we did on the house for the siding. This line stops at that 3/4 inch trim. But then at this point, it's showing that it's going 1/2 inch further out. Again, it would have made more sense at 3/4, but they used 1/2 inch, so we'll do that. And the water table trim, which you probably don't have drawn in, which is on the A elevation light layer, is the bottom of it's at finished floor and the top of it's 1.5 inches above, and the trim runs into it. So then that's that construction. As far as the steps go, they're going to be, according to the note on the floor plan, they're 12 inches deep each. So that means in line with the face of the column here, not with the trim around the column, but along with the face of the column here, you're going to be 12 inches this way, and another 12 inch. So each one of those is a 12-inch offset. And then vertically from the top of the porch down, that's 6 inches. Each one of those is 6 inch. So 6, 6, 6, and 12 and 12. Now that that's been set up, we can start drawing the front porch. All right, so the 2 and 12 roof is actually, because of the way of the overhang and it's so much more shallow, it actually ends up being higher than the 812 roof. But the basic setup, we just project their lines around to get the heights. So I'm going to change the color here so you can see it better. Not really green, should be on, still be on the A elevation dark. So coming off, this is the top of that trim board. That's the bottom of the trim board. That's the bottom of the fascia. You're also going to be seeing these lines back here, which is the board, the trim that's on top of the column there. And that line that I've got going through should have stopped that line shouldn't be there, in other words. Okay, so we're going to extend that around to the 45. Where that crosses, and you can mirror this, you just have to be careful and make sure your ortho's on, popping off. Make sure your ortho's off and you're actually on the 45-degree line. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the front, which is the south elevation. Okay, so this is the top of the 812 trim. The bottom of the fascia for the 212 is slightly above that. They're not supposed to match. They don't match, so don't get confused by that. All right, and then we have an edge line on this side where that roof is. Turn my ortho back on. And we have an edge line on this side, which is that 7-inch overhang. All right, so then we need to run this on across here. And then I'm going to trim it back. Okay, so that's okay. But the construction here should be exactly the same as the construction over on the side. So that means that from the edge of the column here, you go over your 3 inches, just like we did on the side elevation. Happens to line up with the siding below, which makes sense because it's that same 3 inches from the framing. Get rid of my guideline here, and then it continues out that other 1/2 inch from there, just like it did on the side, except we're going the opposite direction here. So then you would have this doing that. This would trim out of that. This continues on up. And then we have the 3/4 inch back here. So you got the edge of the roof here aligning with the roof plan. Three-quarters of an inch back to the fascia line to accommodate the one by there. And then this is actually that fascia that turns. So if you actually look at this over here, you can see that those three lines are matching with the top three, and that is that board at the bottom. And then we've got this space here that you see from here to there, and that's what you're looking at in the front elevation. All right, so then this roof goes up to some point over here, which we'll come back and finish that in a minute. And then on the other side, we do have a similar situation from the other side. So do the same thing we did over there. Yeah, offset 3. Again, should be lining up with the siding that's already there. And you can erase your guideline, then come out another 1/2 inch from there. Which I've already got a blue line there. It's this line, which is already there. All right, and then this would just be trimmed back to there. That would do that. And then up above, this is the edge of the roof over here. So that would be doing that. And then this will come back to 3/4 of an inch. So you trim on your fascia board, you're 3/4 of an inch back. This is at 3 inches over, and that's that 1/2 inch out. Now remember, this is on elevation dark, so it should actually be blue. It's just easier for you to see when it's in green. Okay, so how far does this come back, and where does this wall occur over here? Well, if we go back to the west elevation, I must have hit the wrong one. That's not the one I wanted. Oh, I'm going to the wrong one. This is where we need to be, in the west elevation. So this is how far it wraps the wall to that point. This is where it hits the wall. So extend those over. Go back to the front elevation. South elevation. You could mirror, or you could just do a line and extend it. I think I'm just going to draw a line this time. All right, so this is the lower one, so that's the one that's going to hit the wall over here. Now mine's in the right place because I basically worked backward when I deleted some stuff off this elevation, but you may have to extend or trim this trim line here. But that's where that occurs, and then this upper line here where it wraps around is going to be there. So then you would clean that up to where this is wrapping the wall and the wall is there. On the other side, it's not quite like that because we actually have a hip on the roof plan, and it actually is showing where it hits the siding there, rather than typically you project off the roof plan itself. But in this particular case, because we hit the siding before we ever hit the framing, and that's what you see, that's where we need to project from. So that's where the roof line hits the siding. It comes down and hits there. And then we have a 2 and 12 roof again. So to construct that, remember it's 12 feet over, and then 2 feet up, and then close it. And then you erase your construction lines. And it actually does hit to that side of the trim. For it to hit right at the trim, it would have to be in the same dimension in both directions, and it's not. One's 8 and one's 8'3". So it actually hits to the inside, both on the roof plan in here. So don't really need to draw this line, but just to, so this would be that 212 roof on the front. I remember that this trim and the fascia board, you've actually got a small gap between the top, of the trim at the 812 and the bottom of the fascia at the 212. The two roofs are two different things. So this is out in front of the other roof, so it is actually a little bit higher. Once you've done that, then you can move on to the east side and draw the porch roofs on that side. Alright, so in this particular case, if you actually looked at the, let's see if I've got it up. I thought I did somewhere. Is it this one? Yeah. Alright, so we just drew this. We're about to draw this, but you can see that this construction is the exact same construction as that, except it starts out here. So we can mirror it, but we'll probably have to move it to place. And then also for that particular elevation, they decided to, well, this is where the front door is, so the porch actually stops there, but the roof itself, they decided to run all the way back. So it's a little bit different right through here, because the beam basically going over the top of there into the projection at the front door stops at the trim, but the actual trim and fascia line and the roof itself, they decided to carry all the way back on top of the 812 roof. They could have stopped it a foot back like we've done it in other places, but they decided to carry it all the way back there. Also notice that this goes up and hits this wall, and remember, it actually, that's where that hip line hits 3 inches to the inside, and you notice when it went across the trim, it actually was higher when it hit the opposite side of that trim than when it crossed the trim, which means that when it hits the wall, it's a little bit lower here than when it hits the wall on the other side. Okay, so back to AutoCAD. Alright, so first thing we might do, just to make things easier, since we've already got this constructed here, I'm going to mirror this roof. Make sure I didn't pick up any extra lines there. Alright, again, you can't have ortho on to do this. You'll have to turn ortho off, and you've got to make sure you're on the 45-degree line. I'm not sure I ever pressed mirror. Maybe I did. Yeah, okay. Alright, I've got it there, but obviously I lost it because I hit escape. Let's try again. Mirror. If you hit P sometimes for previous, it'll pick up the same lines. So 45-degree line. Erase source objects should be no. Alright, so now I should be able to go to this elevation. Now that does not put it in the right place, but it should have put it at the right height. Alright, so we come over here. This is the actual edge of the porch line over here, the porch roof. So put it way back inside because the porch is located on the front. So we need to take this and move it, and I missed the line apparently. So we need to take all this from that intersection and move it over. No, I don't want to rotate it. Let's see. Move previous. There we go. Right there, because that's the one that's aligning with the edge of the porch up here. So we discussed that this part of it's going to come back, and because of what the plan does there, see this roof comes back and this beam runs into that wall, so it stops right there at the siding. So we'll trim that back. This part of the roof comes over the top of the 812, so we'll trim it back to the roof there. And then that leaves us with determining where it hits the wall. This is going to hit where it hits here, you know, where it hits the wall. That other line defined that you just project around like we did on the other side, where it hits the wall. And I believe that's the right place. Alright, so that's true back here. That's it, but there's actually another projection line as well. Okay, so that happens to be, if you look at this roof, the one that we're showing there is the one that's beneath here, which is above the upper roof, which you can't really see unless you knew it was there, and it's only going from here back to there. The next part of it is over here. That roof's going from here all the way back to here. So that's the difference. So there's actually two locations of where it hits the wall. There's the one where it hits it, where it's located here, and there's the one where it's located, where it hits there. And again, you should project those from where it hits the siding in both cases. So, all right, so that one. Alright, we got to go back to the elevation itself. So this one is hitting here, which is the one back at where the door is. And this is the one that's out in front. This is where it hits it right here. And it goes back to there to where it hits that, and then that's the smaller roof. Alright, so these do not fill it together. That's because, remember, this roof wraps the other wall the other direction. So what's actually happening is there, it gets a little higher on that side. It continues on up slightly, but this is where it hits the wall. And then it drops over here, and that's where the end of the roof is, so it would continue on across to there. And I left out a line here, forgot to pick it up when I mirrored it. So the roof here is basically doing that. And the trim on the fascia there. You don't really need to draw those last couple of lines because the blue line will take care of it because it's a heavier line anyway. And then on the back, we again have a similar condition because we have a hipped roof back there as well, which is going to start here. Turn my ortho back on. And that's the edge of the roof. So what we might do is draw a temporary construction line from this point to that point, just to make it easier to mirror. So now I'm going to take that and mirror it off that line I just drew. Say no. Alright, apparently I didn't do that exactly right, but we can move it. Got the wrong midpoint apparently. I need to trim that line back. So, not sure how I missed that, but apparently I had another line there. Goes. Edge of the trim should be aligning with the edge of that, and it looks like I got rid of the line, so I'm going to have to copy that back. Give me an intersection. Anyway, so the edge of the roof should be aligning with the edge of the roof on the roof plan as well. Alright, just like on the other side, if you look at the plan, this roof here is coming up all the way to there, and then this one is a lower roof. So this one's actually wrapping around and going up further. This is the upper roof, but the lower roof is kind of wrapping this wall and coming back around. Alright, so if that is the case, then this roof is stopping at there, and then it's wrapping around here, so we need to know where that hits the wall. We don't really know that till we draw it over here, but we do know that this is going to trim back to this roof. And that this, because this is the edge of that covered porch, these lines will trim back to there, because this is the actual house wall and this is the porch out here. So we still need to determine where that is, but we can't really do that till we draw the rear elevation. Alright, so going to the rear elevation. We have the hip lines, and it's going to be very similar in some ways to what we had drawn over here, except it's not going to be in the same location again. So remember, you need to go to the edge of your roof on both sides. And I'm drawing the first floor 212 roof. Well, we've already established what's happening with the 212 roof, so we can just take what we did here and mirror that one over. Remember, you have to take your ortho off to do this. Make sure you're on the 45. Say no, so the other one stays. Obviously, it doesn't come in at the right place. We'll have to move it. And I'll go from that intersection, turn my ortho back on, move it over to where that roof projection was. We're going to have something similar on the other side, so we'll mirror previous off the midpoint of the roof there. So again, it aligns with the edge here. And then this does not come to a ridge line because it hits the wall before it ever does that. And it's going to hit the wall at the siding. So what we need to do is project where it hits the siding down. It ends up being slightly below the second floor line. And then you might use J for join. And it'll join your lines so you don't have overlapping lines. All right, now that we've drawn this in, I'm going to get rid of my construction lines here. course, these trim, 3.5-inch trim will come down and hit that roof. But this is where it hits the wall on that side, so we can project that back around now. And it runs back into that roof there because that's the way they decided to do it. And it stops at this wall, so that's where it wraps, but that's how you determine that height. Which brings us back around to the same elevation we started with, but we still need to finish because we have the roof here that we need to add, which is very similar to the other side. So if you drew it right here, which is on the opposite side of the house, and we'll assume it hits the wall at the same place. We'll have to double check. Mirror that back. At a midpoint. Make sure it's lining up with the plate height. Alright, so we need to project around from where it hits the wall here. Which would mean and then that's one of those roofs that just continue on back to the other roof here. And this of course stops at where the house wall is opposed to the porch. And then all of those that I just drew in green here, except for one of the lines, belongs on the A elevation dark. Let's see, the one I was just looking at was this one, so that top line above that can't see it, I can't tell. Get in a little closer. Yeah, that's really, I can see it. There's actually two lines there. That's a hatch line. That's that real thick line. It's not really thick when it prints, just in this PDF. So back in AutoCAD, all these lines including that one. And then the only one that's on elevation light is that one. So they should look like that. Again, I just drew it in green because it's easier to see. Still belongs on the A elevation light layer, or dark, depending on what you're doing. This one, we're taking care about the trim. Not that one, this one. That's not right. That should be blue.